Boeing shares dropping sharply this morning. That is having a big impact on the Dow futures overall. Right now, you're looking at the Dow futures down by about 78 points. Boeing is down so much that it would actually drag the Dow down by about 175 points by itself right now. So we're going to continue to watch this. Boeing shares right now down by 6.3%. That's a drop of almost $24 to $351.01. Phil LeBeau joins us from Chicago. He's got some of the reasons behind this big drop that we're seeing this morning. And Phil, there are a couple.
Right. Well, first of all, you guys have talked about the new 737 MAX software issue, which came out late in the day yesterday. And you have to really look at why that came out, why it was leaked out. The fact that it was leaked out indicates there still seems to be some separation between Boeing and the FAA as they look towards recertifying this plane, making sure that everything is working as it should be on the 737 MAX. That's one issue that started all of this. But why this has accelerated, Becky, as you mentioned, the IATA statement regarding when this plane is finally certified by the FAA, which everybody expects will eventually happen, then the question becomes, what are the requirements for training pilots? And internationally, there is a feeling, not only among airlines, but also among regulators, that perhaps there should be more stringent testing and training with pilots that may include simulator time. And the reason that's important is because if you add simulator time as a requirement for testing and training for pilots of the 737 MAX, you're talking about millions, tens of millions of dollars, much costlier for airlines, much costlier for Boeing, and it really drags out the potential for getting these planes back in the air. And the fact that this came up at the IATA meeting in Montreal indicates that this is still a potential issue out there that could delay or extend out how long it might take before you see the MAX getting back in the air. And it could be much costlier not only for airlines, but also for Boeing ultimately.
But, Phil, let me ask you, and I just want to go back to the beginning of this, which is the relationship between the FAA and Boeing, and what seems like a continued level of distrust, because I think that the issue is that distrust is, A, problematic, and B, could spill over to the public, and then you have it with the pilots and everybody else.
Right. And the fact, Andrew, look, you and I have been in this business long enough to know these things just don't kind of pop up. There had to have been some type of a discussion between some parties somewhere saying, look, we think this is a big deal, and some pushback saying, don't worry about it, we think that we can handle this. And this is just my surmise as I was looking at this coming out yesterday. The fact that it leaked out late in the day ultimately prompted Boeing to issue a securities filing, an SEC filing saying, well, look, this was brought to our attention. We are looking to mitigate the issue. We understand where the FAA is coming from. You're right, Andrew. This gets right to the heart of that relationship between the FAA and Boeing. And while publicly the acting head of the FAA has said, look, we're working closely with Boeing, it's a close relationship, the way that this came out indicates something far different.
Phil, the IATA represents 200 carriers. How much weight and how much heft would them calling for pilot training have in this overall picture? Quite a bit,
Becky. And it's, remember, it's ultimately not just the airlines that they represent, but the influence that they have on international regulators, whether it's EASA, which is basically the FAA counterpart for Europe, or for the China Civil Aviation Authority, the counterpart for the FAA in China, or in other countries. But it's really China and Europe. Those are the two big ones in terms of regulators internationally who are looking at the MAX and saying, is there enough in terms of training for pilots? Remember, guys, we sit there and we say we have older pilots here in the U.S. They know how to handle these situations. That's not the case internationally. There's a pilot shortage. So you have younger, less trained, less experienced pilots often who will be flying these planes.
And if I remember correctly, part of the reason for Boeing's decision in calling this the 737 MAX, even though it's a very different airline, not very similar to a lot of changes in this airline versus some of the earlier 737s, part of the reason with still classifying it as that is because they didn't want to have to go through additional pilot training and time spent in simulators.
And the whole certification process would have been much more extended if it's an all-new, 100% brand-new airplane, as opposed to saying it is a 737, but we are amending it. It's a much quicker, more condensed process, similar to what you've seen with Airbus when it comes to the A320 and then the A321neo. You do not have to go through the same level of work, if you will, and length of time for certifying a new aircraft.
All right. Phil, thank you. We appreciate it. Again, that stock is down
bet.
by 5.8% right now. It is having an impact on the Dow, and we will continue to watch that.